Alright guys, welcome to this lesson. In this theory lesson we're going to cover 4-note chords. Okay, so you will have done 3-note chords I'm sure with Mary last semester, but we're going to do 4-note chords. And I think I've mentioned it a few times already, you probably have some experience. The other day I was talking about dominant chords and things like that. But we're going to go through from the beginning 4-note chords. So first of all we have a scale here, obviously the easiest scale in the world. C major, always a good one to start with. So, but first of all, I'm just going to build a chord off each of these notes. A 3-note chord, which you've probably done this before. So I'll just quickly do that. So, it's just following a pattern, as you know. If the note is on a line, you add 2 notes on a line. If a note is in a space, you add 2 notes in a space. It's just following a pattern. Okay? My pen is running out. So there we go, we just follow that pattern all the way. There we go. So what are these chords called? So you should hopefully know the order of major chords in a major scale. So the first chord is always major, so this is C. The second chord is D minor. Hopefully this is nothing new, so E minor is next, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and back to C. Okay, so major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, back to major. Or no matter what key you're in, it's always going to be the same order for chords, 3-note chords in a major scale. But we're going to do 4-note chords. Okay, so it's fairly simple. All we're going to do is add another note. So if the chord's on the lines, you just add another note to the top, following the same pattern. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll talk about what they're all called. Okay, so we have a note on the top. Simple as that. 4-note chords. That's a dodgy note. There. So we need to add some ledger lines here. Hopefully you can read these notes above the staff, so you just got to follow the alphabet. I'll get to that in a tick. So obviously these chord names are no longer 100% correct. They're close, but we need to add something to it. So the 3 main ones we're going to worry about are major 7 chords, minor 7 chords, and dominant 7th chords. And I've mentioned some of those already. So let me just go through what each of these ones have now turned into, and maybe if you want, you could pause the video now and have a sort of think about what you think each of these chords would be called now. If you want to try that first, pause the video, and then I'll go through the answers now. So the first one, and I'll just say what they are, and then I'll explain why. So the first one is C major 7. Now don't forget, for major 7 there's many different ways of writing major 7. I like to use a triangle. Where am I? There it is, triangle. You can also get C capital M7, and you can sometimes get, well not sometimes, quite often, C major 7. And I see all 3 of those regularly in music that I read and play. But anyway, C major 7 for the first one, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G 7, A minor 7, and B diminished 7th, and C major 7. In this video, I'm not going to talk too much about diminished 7th chords. It gets they're quite confusing. I'm not going to worry about that just for now, because there's lots of different names for it, and there's half diminished, or minor 7.5. There's all these different names for it. So I'm pretty much not going to worry about that one at all. I'm not going to talk about that one. We're just going to talk about the other main 3 that I mentioned: major 7, minor 7, and dominant 7th, or just 7. Okay, so you'll notice we have 2 major 7 chords. We have chord 1 is a major 7 chord, and chord 4 is a major 7 chord. We then have 3 minor 7 chords. chord 2, 3 and 6 are minor 7, and then we have one dominant 7th chord, which is G7. So let me just talk a little bit about those chords, each of those three. So major 7, it's quite a luscious sounding chord. I've got a piano over there, I might even just play it in a tick, so you can hear what they sound like. But it's quite a pretty, nice sounding chord. The top note is always one semitone below the octave. So you have a C note in there. So if you had a C on top, the 7th is just a B, one semitone below B. That'll become more relevant in a tick when I explain dominant 7th chords. So that's a nice, pretty sound. Let me play that chord for you. C major 7. Okay, so that was C major 7. As I said, nice, pretty sounding chord. It has that little semitone between the 7th and the octave. Minor 7 chords, fairly basic. Okay, I'll play one in a tick. And the 7th note here is a tone below the octave. So if we had a, I might write it in actually. So if we have a D note at the bottom. If we had added a D note at the top, okay, which you could easily do, that D is the 7th note, which is the C, is a tone below D. So when you might be wondering, why am I bothering explaining whether it's a semitone and a tone below the octave and blah blah blah. It is relevant because often when you're talking about 7th chords and that 7th note, you often talk about, is it a semitone below the octave or is it a tone below the octave? And it'll come even more relevant in a tick. So that's why I'm bothering explaining it that way, whether it's a semitone or a tone. So the 7th here, I'll play these chords in a tick as well, is a tone below the octave. Whereas that first one, the major 7th, C to B, is a semitone. Let me play a minor 7 chord for you. So here's D minor 7. Okay, so that was D minor 7. I don't need to worry about these ones here. The next one we're going to worry about is G7. So sometimes this chord is simply a 7th chord. Its full name is dominant 7th chord. Sometimes people will refer it as a dominant 7th chord. And it's a dominant 7th chord because it's chord 5, okay? And we've been talking about dominant chords previously, okay? So, and often a dominant chord is a 7 chord. Now, is this a semitone or a tone below the G note at the top? So if we add the G note at the top, which is here, you tell me, is that, our 7th is the F, and our octave of the actual chord is G. Is that a semitone or a tone? It's a tone, okay? So this is why I've been talking about this is quite relevant between when you compare a major 7 chord to a dominant 7th chord. They're very different sounding chords. I'll play some in a tick. Very different sounding chords. A major 7th, which has that semitone at the top, is a nice pretty sound, whereas a dominant 7th chord, which has the tone at the top between the 7th and the octave, is a rougher sounding chord, more of a bluesy sounding chord, and I'll play that for you now. First of all, I'll just play G7 so you can hear what G7 sounds like. So this is G7. Okay, but the more relevant comparison I can give you is I might play you C major 7 and C dominant 7th, so you can hear the difference between those two chords. And all I'm doing is changing the top note from being a semitone with the B, and in a C7 chord it's going to be a B flat. But you can really hear the difference between a nice pretty major 7 chord and a more rough bluesy dominant 7th chord. So this is C major 7 and C7. So C major 7. I want the octave, hold on. And then C7. C major 7. C7. Okay, so hopefully I haven't confused you, but they're the three main 4-note chords we're going to worry about for now, which are your major 7 chord, your minor 7 chord, and your dominant 7th chord. Okay, and with the minor 7 chord, it's fairly straightforward, but the main thing you need to remember between us, the main thing that determines whether it's a major 7 or a dominant 7th is the distance between the 7th note and the octave. So for a major 7, B to C, that's a semitone. A dominant 7th has the lowered 7th, sometimes it's called a lowered 7th, where it has a tone. So here's a question, and I think I asked this in class last week. I played a C7 chord there before. So I was comparing a C major 7 and a C dominant 7th chord. Here's a question, and pause the video if you want to work it out. What key is a C dominant 7th chord from? Because it's not from C major. As you can see in C major, there is no C7 or C dominant 7th. The 7th chord is a C major 7. So what key is C7 from? Pause the video if you want, because I'm going to tell the answer right now. So if C7 is the dominant chord, you'll have to work your way back to 1. C, it's actually B flat, or you can just say C, B for now, so C, B, A, G, F. So C7 is actually in the key of F major. Okay? Well done if you got that correct. So I'm not going to, I think this video is long enough as it is, but you can do this in any key. So here we have G major, right? Key signature of F sharp, we're in G major. It's exactly the same thing. So the chords in this particular key are going to be G major. The order, like the 3-note chords, the order is always the same. G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, C major 7, D dominant 7th, E minor 7, F sharp diminished 7th, and back to G. Okay, so it's always the same order. So that is 4-note chords. Cool, see you on the next one.